What's going on, guys? Sorry I wasn't able to upload anything yesterday. It was a busy day. And of course, we saw a face melting rally with stocks like Cleanspark up over 20%. Bitcoin back over 70,000. Now today's a bit more tame. We're going to talk about what's going on with Bitcoin and a couple of different Bitcoin miners, a few Bitcoin miners I have been adding. We're going to talk about the spot Bitcoin ETFs. We had 5 days of outflows. Yesterday was a very slight inflow day. We're going to talk about the Bitcoin halving approaching, and we're going to talk about who owns Cleanspark. Now, if you guys get something useful out of this, make sure you like, subscribe, ring the notification bell. Check out the links down below if you're interested in any free stocks and cryptos. And let's take a look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin is looking great, still bullish, still above its moving averages, still above its EMAs. And it does look like we're attempting to claim our previous peak as a support, that 69,000 area back in 2021. We are working on flipping that as a support. Now, if we fail this test, if we fail to flip this as a support, this 69, if we break back under 69, there's a possibility we head down towards this trend line that we have utilized, this white line here. We have bounced off of it a few times recently. We've bounced off of it back in late February, and we bounced off of it in around the beginning of January. So if Bitcoin does see some weakness, if we're not able to break over 70 and keep it, if we break 79 and start heading down, I would be watching for the $65,000 to $66,000 area by around the end of March. So keep an eye on this trend line. I do think Bitcoin will test it if we can't flip our previous cycle peak as support. But with this recent pullback, Bitcoin's looking a lot better. We have now cooled down on the daily. Look at the RSI. And you know, I've mentioned this before, but going over to the weekly, yes, we're overbought, but we have seen a much more overbought RSI at the cycle peaks. We are nowhere near the Bitcoin cycle peak yet. And on the monthly, it's even more convincing that we're not anywhere near the peak. You can see that we're barely getting towards overbought here on the monthly. We have seen a much more heavily overbought on the monthly back in 2021. And again, back in 2017, the year after the halving, the cycle peak. Which at the rate we're going, our peak may be early 2025. This could be a longer halving cycle with so much spot Bitcoin ETF buying pressure. And maybe the 4-year cycle is forever changed, and instead of these dramatic 70-80% pullbacks, we see like a 40-50% correction down the road in the future bear market. But now is definitely not the time to sell. We are under a month away from the halving. And while this has been an exciting year so far, I think the best is yet to come. And this is something very interesting and very important as we approach the halving. Nobody wants to sell Bitcoin as on-chain activity limps. Average on-chain transfer volume is well below the 2021 bull market peak. Hardly any value is being moved on-chain. Nobody wants to sell. Now, the spot Bitcoin ETFs could play a role on this, but look at where we are here in terms of transfers. No one is selling their Bitcoin yet. Back in 21 and 2022, which indicated the top, we saw a large amount of Bitcoin transfers. I think everyone knows the halving is approaching, and now is definitely not the time to sell. And the percentage of Bitcoin supply that was last active between 3 and 5 years ago continues to increase. Once we see the price really start to move, that's when on-chain volume will surge. Older coins will move to exchanges to be sold. Until then, low on-chain volume is a sign of supply-side illiquidity as we approach the halving, as we come closer to the days where Bitcoin's incoming supply is cut in half. And this is approaching in under a month while we have people not transferring their Bitcoin, while we have huge amounts of spot Bitcoin ETF inflows. Not recently, I admit, but this is going to change. I do believe the spot Bitcoin ETFs will see increased volume again, but there will be hitches like this along the way where we see a few days of outflows. We are still waiting for Grayscale to lower their fees, which they said they would do. It's just a matter of when. I do think when that happens, we will see considerably less outflows from GBTC, and it's honestly a matter of time until they lower those fees. The halving is 23 days more or less away from us. We are now under a month away. I do think now is the time to be buying the Bitcoin miners on any weakness. Now is the time to be buying Bitcoin on any pullbacks, and I believe that will be the case for the next at least 3 months or so, maybe 6 months. But let me know in this cycle where you guys plan to sell. Do you plan on selling in late 2024? Do you think this is going to be an extended cycle and you plan on selling in late 2025? Or do you have other plans? For me, it depends on what I'd be selling. For instance, Cleanspark I would be holding for much longer than a lot of these other Bitcoin miners. The riskier Bitcoin miners I would be selling earlier. I also want to talk about the spot Bitcoin ETFs. We finally stopped our 5-day outflow streak. And Fidelity's FBTC actually had the highest single day net inflow. Now, what broke this streak? We saw a 5-day outflow. Well, we had a $15 million of net inflow. Very, very small. It might seem like interest is waning. We went from nearly $10 billion of spot Bitcoin ETF volume back in early March, to now 3.1 billion on Friday that was recorded. This doesn't mean that demand is done here. This does not mean that all we'll see from here on is net outflow days. We are going to continue to see inflows. There are going to be hiccups along the way. There are going to be these periods of a couple days where we all we see is net outflow. Don't let that shake you out. Overall, these spot Bitcoin ETFs are going to continue to see inflows. And imagine what happens when the Bitcoin halving comes around. Now, before we get to a couple of the Bitcoin miners, I want to show you something else very exciting. Coinbase's Bitcoin supply hits a 9-year low. Coinbase now only holds 344,000 Bitcoin as of March 18th. Last time reserves were this low for Coinbase was back in 2015. Not even in the last cycle. And also, Bitcoin balances in accumulation addresses has also rebounded to over 3.2 million Bitcoin, nearing a record high. And what are these accumulation addresses? Well, these are addresses with over 10 Bitcoin and no outgoing transactions or ties to Bitcoin mining firms or exchanges. So one fund alone holds about a third of what Coinbase has left, and it only took them a few months to do that. As we approach the halving, we'll have even less incoming Bitcoin, and this supply on Coinbase is going to shrink even more so. Now let's talk about Cleanspark and who owns Cleanspark. Well, in terms of the overall structure, we have 4.5% of all of Cleanspark shares owned by insiders, 9% by mutual funds, and 20%, nearly 21% by other institutional investors, with 65% of Cleanspark in the public's hands. Who are the largest institutions that hold Cleanspark? Of course, we have Vanguard owning a 5% stake in Cleanspark, and next up is iShares, which is basically BlackRock, holding nearly 4% stake in the company. And I do think we're going to see some updated analyst price targets soon because we have 4 strong buy ratings. However, the price is under where we're currently at, with the average at 1830. We do have an analyst saying 27, we have an analyst saying 10, but the average is at 1830, and we have already passed that. I do think we're going to see some revised price targets from some of these analysts. We're at a very important point for Cleanspark. We are testing our previous peak. If we can flip this as a support, I do think we're heading much higher. It's a matter of seeing how the market does with this area. So it will be an important week for Cleanspark to see how we do here. Do we find this as resistance and start heading lower? Do we find this as support and start building off of it? I do think the latter is more likely than the former. The upcoming quarter, they're going to report the quarter we're in right now, which is going over January, February, and March. They're expecting $103 million. Last quarter, they reported a profit and they reported $73 million. I do suspect, and I said this in a previous video somewhere, Cleanspark is going to see another profitable quarter. This is going to be reported after the halving. This is going to be reported in May. We're going to see one more profitable quarter before we likely flip to unprofitability after the halving, unless Bitcoin starts heading quickly towards the probably 80 to 90,000 range, which we're really right around the corner from. So honestly, a lot of these miners could be posting profitable quarters shortly after the halving. But back to what I was saying, I do expect Cleanspark to post at least one profitable quarter. Could take the market by surprise because everyone's expecting unprofitability from the miners. But keep in mind, this is January, February, March before the halving takes effect. Hopefully the market isn't watching too closely. Hopefully this takes the market by surprise and causes a nice little spike for Cleanspark as everyone's worried about mining rewards being cut in half. This could breathe a sigh of relief for the market. Maybe the market's smart enough and will realize that this is actually time reported before the halving. But regardless of all that, Cleanspark, when they reported this quarter, this is the quarter ending December of last year. Where was Bitcoin at? So in the quarter that they reported, Bitcoin did not get any higher than $42,000. And also for a good part of that quarter, Bitcoin was under 30,000. So in that range of Bitcoin's price, Cleanspark saw profitability. If they want to see a profitable quarter again after the halving, so 2 quarters from now, Bitcoin basically has to be double this average price where they reported a profit in that quarter post-halving. Throughout that quarter, Bitcoin is essentially at about an average of 37,000 or so, while most of December, Bitcoin was over 40,000 during that quarter. For a really good part of October, Bitcoin was well under 30,000. So I would say with an average double Bitcoin's 37,000 price, Cleanspark would see profitability. That would put Bitcoin's price somewhere around 72,000 or so, maybe 75,000, and Cleanspark would see profitable quarters again after the halving. I mean, we're almost there in price for Bitcoin. I think people aren't realizing how profitable these Bitcoin miners can be with only a little bit higher Bitcoin price after the halving. If Bitcoin is in the 6 figures, a lot of these Bitcoin miners are going to see profitability. We are not that far away. I do think now is definitely the time to be buying the Bitcoin miners. Any weakness ahead of the halving is a buying opportunity. I've been saying this. And stocks like Iris Energy are very, very attractive right now. I see Iris as a great add. If you want to play this on a swing, I do think a break of $6 for Iris Energy could send it towards 7. If you wanted to play this short term, look for a breakout of 6 and play it towards 7, towards 680 or so. If Iris Energy finds resistance at 6, it was a previous level that we definitely saw a reaction on. We saw breakout and a hold as support. We saw breakdown when we pulled back. We've seen it as a support level and then a bouncing down point once support was broken. So this psychological 6 is an important level. If we do find it as a resistance, I do think there's a possibility we head towards the low 5s. But Iris Energy is looking bullish. We're still in a beautiful uptrend. We are now back over the 50 and the 200. They did not give us a death cross. Seems like the crisis was averted. Also, Iris Energy, they are expecting a profitable quarter, and this is the quarter before the halving, January, February, and March. We're going to see a theme here. I think the market is going to be surprised. They're expecting a $50 million quarter. Last quarter was 42, which was a beat. Next, I want to talk about Sphere 3D. This is probably one of the highest risk miners. This is also only like a $25 million market cap, whereas we have other Bitcoin miners like Cleanspark in the 3 billion range. And I've done previous videos going over how Sphere 3D has a very, very attractive hash rate to market cap. They are only mining a 1.3 exahash per second. But when you compare that to other miners that are doing 10 times that, these other miners are also more than like 30 to 40 times the market cap. Part of that is due to Sphere 3D's risky nature. It's a very, very small cap. They were under $1 for a while, so that was adding to fear too. But now they're well over $1. We are trying to establish this previous area as a support. It was a support level here, was a resistance, flipped as a bouncing off support point. Seems like we're trying to hold this 130 area as support again. What I want to see for Sphere 3D is a break of 165. That'll start indicating that we're creating higher lows. But I also want to see a break of this 190 area, giving us some higher highs and higher lows to then let us continue to run. Now with Sphere 3D, we are under our moving averages, but we did recently flash a golden cross because of this huge run back here. So hopefully we don't see more weakness. If we can start popping here, we will not see a death cross. But if we start showing more weakness, if we start heading towards the low 1s, we might see a death cross here, and that might bring more fear. So just be aware of that. Keep an eye on the potential for a death cross. If we start popping from here, though, we're very unlikely to see that death cross, and we will probably start utilizing these as support once we head above them. Sphere 3D is also expecting growth in revenue. However, they're expecting an unprofitable quarter compared to the others. But Sphere 3D definitely has a hell of a climb ahead of it if it wants to get back to its previous highs. And by that, I mean 52-week highs. We are still 65% from our recent top. That was back in like January. I do think the halving is priced in regarding most, if not all of these Bitcoin miners. I think now is the time to be taking advantage of them as we approach the halving, not after the halving, but before the halving. And you got to take advantage of the short-term fear. You got to take advantage of the short-term worry. And because of Cleanspark's recent run, people have been asking me, should I just get out of some of these other miners and get into Cleanspark? That's completely up to you. But what I wouldn't do is I wouldn't chase a stock that was up 20%. While my other stocks are lagging. It's all up to your strategy. Some people just want to only follow the strongest stocks, and there is something to that. But I do not think it's a good idea to exit some other Bitcoin miners that haven't ran yet and get into a stock like Cleanspark that had a 20% day yesterday. While I'm very bullish on Cleanspark, and while I do think it's going much higher, I personally am holding off on it and adding to the other miners, the BTBTs, the Sphere 3Ds, the Iris Energies. Part of that is because Cleanspark is my heaviest weighting in my portfolio. But regardless of that, you don't want to chase something that's just going crazy. A lot of people have this idea, and then they do it, and then suddenly the other things are doing good, and the thing they jumped into was now overbought and pulling back. But all I have to say is, don't chase. You want to buy during the fear, and then enjoy the run-up, not looking at the run-up and missed it and saying, now I want to get in after this run. But what are you guys picking up today? It's nice to see a little strength in the miners after a really good green day yesterday. And it's good to see Bitcoin trying to reclaim its previous peak back in 2021 as a support. But keep an eye on the market, keep an eye on the spot Bitcoin ETFs. If we continue to see inflows, this will be a sigh of relief for the market. If we continue to see outflows, that might bring a bit more fear. So it will be important to watch for the rest of this week what these spot Bitcoin ETFs are doing. Are we seeing net inflows again? Are we seeing outflows again? As time goes by, Grayscale will have less and less funds available to see these huge outflow days. And soon they will change their fee structure, and we'll probably see less outflows because of that. But let me know what you guys think. Do you think Bitcoin is going higher from here? Do you think before the halving we're going to see 6 figures? We have a little under a month left. I think by the halving we could be pushing new all-time highs, probably in the 75,000 towards 80 range. I could be wrong, but I think that's a very good likelihood here. But let me know what you guys think about Bitcoin. Let me know what you think about the Bitcoin miners. Have you been loading up on them? Are you avoiding them as we approach the halving? Are you hedging your position with some puts? Let me know what you're doing out there. Thanks as always, guys, and I'll catch you next time.